We're here today at the MotoIQ garage with our Project C8 Corvette. Love it or hate it, the C8 is a really badass car, and we're going to take a walk around today to see some of the technology and the construction of this thing. So let's quit talking and take a look. So here we are underneath the car, and I'd like to introduce Mark Gearhart. He's the owner of the car, and he's also the dude from Holley. What do you do at Holley, Mark?
I'm a marketing guy.
Oh, I thought you were cool.
No, I'm just a typical marketing guy.
Oh, okay. So like this car has a lot of technology, and I think it's really amazing, and it's incredible how GM is able to deliver a car with this much trick stuff for the price point.
Yeah, I mean, the Z51 package, I think, is a no-brainer to go along with, an already incredible car. Obviously, you can see a lot of the, if everything's flat-bottomed here from the factory, it's all pretty standard from even a non-Z51 car.
Now, you've already done the track day in this, right?
Yeah, I've actually done Auto Club, and I've done, this was last week I did Streets of Willow with it.
So what are some of the points of the car that you like, and what do you think some of its weaknesses are that we can help out as a project car?
I think some of the strengths are, when you're getting used to the vehicle, with the Z51 package, there's a lot of PTM modes, or the performance traction management. So you can run anything from like their dry calibration all the way up to race, and there's varying levels of interference as you move through it. So I was running initially at Auto Club in Sport 1, where it interferes but still lets you to kind of move the car around a little bit. And then this last weekend I ran it in Sport 2 halfway through the race, or through the track day, and you can definitely tell that it frees you up a lot on the nannies and such. But just being able to get in this car and drive it pretty seamlessly without having experience in the car is really easy. I mean, this car's got the track alignment on it, and the track alignment makes a completely different vehicle out of this Corvette. You basically get 3 degrees of negative front camber, negative 2 or 2.5 rear camber, some caster changes and stuff like that, but it really wakes up the car on the track purpose.
You actually turned some really pretty decently competitive lap times for the track day crowd in this car with very little experience on the track that you've never been on too, right?
Yeah, I've only maybe done in my whole life like 8 track days, and then last weekend was 2 days ago was my first time ever at Streets, second time ever at Streets. Last time was 6 years previous, and went 123.1, which I think was like the 5th fastest out of like 60 cars for the day. While the car has forged lines on it for street use, it's a 2021 setup. I run a 1920 stock setup right now, just because the tire choice is a little bit better. That you don't get a lot of competitive tire choices in the 2021 setup. So I was running Goodyear Supercar 3Rs on the car, completely stock brakes. And right now it's just got some prototype iBox springs on it. And the last bit of modification we have here is the Hooker Blackheart catback system. So this has got NPP and the active valves all hooked to it. So compliant, like it'll still work like the factory. And this was good for about 15 horse. So a little bit more horsepower, but really not a whole lot different from what you'd roll off the showroom floor with. Main difference being the tire.
So 15 horsepower, that short exhaust system, and it's a catback. That's pretty amazing, actually, for a late model car to leave that much power on the table with a catback.
I was surprised, too. I mean, it was like 15 horse and torque, pound-feet of torque all the way through the curve. And then actually above the curve, it was picking up about 20 horse, but that's in like the last 200 or 300 RPM. So you can really tell that the Hooker Blackheart really is helping free up the not choking the motor up as much as the factory exhaust is, especially at the higher RPM. So maybe at the point where people have got cams or intake manifolds, you can push the power band even higher, then I think you'll see that delta even grow, where you can even add another 300 to 400 more RPM to the motor. Because this thing only turns 6,500. It's not even something that turns a lot of RPM by any means.
So this car is totally stock except for some iBox springs and catback, the Chevrolet recommended track alignment, and like wheels and tires. And the tires aren't R compound or anything; they're just ultra high performance summer tires, right?
Yeah, so like I said, when I was I've been running the last 2 track days with it, or the only 2 track days. They've been the Goodyear Supercar 3R, so they're a 100 treadwear tire, and I mean they grip pretty well. But the car's fairly neutral with the track alignment. Definitely a little bit of oversteer, maybe just how I drive it. Definitely need a little bit more rear tire, I think, in my opinion. Even going to like a 19 square, not square, but like a 19 front and rear setup, I think would be really beneficial, because even on the 20s, you're kind of limited on sizes. This has got a 325 on it on the 21, and then the factory 20 is a 305. So I would like to do a 19 rear with like a 325 rear, and then go from a 245 to a 265 front. So basically add about an inch to the front and the rear tire. I think will help the car out, especially at the high speed turn stuff.
Any shortcomings in the car that you feel that we need to attack?
I mean, I think that there's definitely room for improvement on the suspension side. This has the MagRide upgrade, so the Z51 and the MagRide had to be paired together in 2020. In 2021, you actually can get the MagRide separate. So, like, the performance traction management plays a part in with the MagRide and power delivery and stuff like that. The car just hops around a lot. You can kind of feel it not reacting as well as it should. So I think putting a set of good coilovers on this will, I think, also really help out the car feel more planted around the corner.
What about the brakes?
I think, in my opinion, the brakes aren't that good on this car. I think that they fade out pretty bad towards the end of a session, and for this kind of vehicle, they just don't stop as hard as I think they should. It definitely, which is funny too, because this car has a pretty high dust that comes off these factory pads, more than I've ever seen on a factory pad in my life. So I know they put a little bit more aggressive pad in these, but I'm already like 80% way through my brake pad life, and that's with 2 track days and like 2,400 street miles. So definitely a big area of improvement. I think the 2 biggest ones are going to be putting a good coilover on it and putting at least a set of drilled rotors and pads, but ideally even go maybe a little bit bigger on the brakes. I'm a heavy brake guy, so I like to take in, get into the corner as deep as possible and stuff like that, but I definitely feel like the car could benefit from some better brakes.
This car kind of blows my mind. I mean, the chassis is aluminum, and it's made out of aluminum extrusions and hollow castings. It uses a combination of welding and bonding. It has like a stressed composite skins bonded to the space frame to give it the like a tub on the prototype. Now that isn't to clear the powertrain like it is like in the older Corvettes, since the engine's in the middle, but it's actually like a backbone of the chassis that helps your bending rigidity. Like some of the things I noticed is that it has like a honeycomb composite bottom part that goes down the middle, but it's removable to access things for maintenance. But you can see those really strong bolts. So those bolts bear a lot of weight, so for shear and everything. So you can tell that that's a totally stressed component. So it's a big boxed composite member going right down the middle of the car. That's got to be huge for bending stiffness. Some of the other things I see is like you have forged control arms, aluminum. I did notice a step back from the C7 though. The C7 had these really trick hollow cast arms, so you get a lot of rigidity and lightweight. And the C8 seemed to have gone to a conventional, just like a regular forging. What I really like about this car is it has like straightforward, unequal length A-arms front and rear. Now, like I've never been a fan of multi-link and weird toe curves and weird camber curves, because I think that sometimes that adds weird coloration to the car's handling, especially like once you start to develop it as more of a track car. And I really like this straight up geometry, because to me unequal length A-arms are probably the best for a track car. The other thing I noticed is that GM is kind of getting away from running a lot of anti-squat and anti-dive. Now every generation of the Corvette seems to have less and less, and this has less than the C7 and the C6. I guess the other big departure from the Corvette is the transaxle. Now, in prior days, it was either like a manual transmission or an automatic, and GM actually got the automatic to work pretty good as a pretty good performance transmission, you know, with pretty good shift scheduling and rev matching and all that kind of stuff. But this is a dual clutch transmission, which is kind of like what a lot of supercars run, and it's actually like a manual transmission that's computer controlled with 2 clutches, so it can pre-select the next gear for lightning fast shifting. How do you like this transmission?
I love it. I think it's one of the best parts of the car, and this transmission is the brother or sister of it is in the GT500, the new GT500. So obviously it's the transaxle version, but I mean we've seen people make 1,000 horsepower to the tires with this new DCT Tremec and no problem. So it's definitely built robustly, and I love how it shifts. I've never owned a DCT car before, and I mean just the LT2 on just the downshifts and a little bit of burbles and the pops it makes. It's just, I love it. I mean, it's just unbelievable to drive. You get head turns when you're up on that upshifts, just driving it through traffic. People are always staring at it, but on the track, it's amazing.
Now, I know a lot of you MotoIQ fans are going to hate me, but then I kind of feel the same way after driving some of these twin clutch transmissions. It's like, well, why have a manual anymore? As much as I like shifting gears, I don't think you can even beat these transmissions anymore.
I think I'm a manual transmission purist as well, but I think until you actually drive a real modern DCT, not we're talking about E46 SMG cars, we're talking about something that's a late model one that's got really crisp up and down shifts and really good strategy in the PCM, it will definitely change your theory about DCT and manual transmissions.
So the differential in the back's pretty trick too, right? It's a electromechanical clutch limited slip, so it actually do you know if it provides torque vectoring or anything?
I think it does, and that's again one of the upgrades that you get with the Z51 package is going to the ELSD.
That's a pretty cool feature. A lot of us have the the cheesy electronic limited slip where it just uses the brakes to kind of act like to prevent the one wheel from running away when it breaks loose, and this is actually a real limited slip just controlled by the computer, not anything like that, right?
Yeah, it still uses the brakes depending on what traction level you're in or performance traction management level you're in. So like if you're still in Sport 1 or Sport 2, it's still going to grab the brakes just to make sure that you're like not going to send it off the side of a cliff or anything like that. I haven't braved myself to try to see what this thing's like in race mode around the track yet, to see if it really does shut everything off. But you can definitely feel it grabbing the brakes when you're like, okay, maybe that corner I got in a little too hot, or it's maybe didn't like exactly what I was doing. It'll try to slow down one of the rear wheels to keep it from getting into a overspin scenario and breaking traction.
It's not like super intrusive though, like right? Like a lot of these systems, I can't stand to drive it because it feels like it's totally hampering you. Do you get that feeling at all?
In certain parts of the track, that's where you kind of go, I think I've graduated from Sport 1 to Sport 2. It actually starts at wet and goes to dry, and then goes to Sport 1, then goes to Sport 2, and then it goes into race. So as you work up, the less nanny as it has. So I've never tried it on dry. I went straight to Sport 1. But the good thing is when it's like, grabbing a brake or pulling a little bit of power, it gives you back almost immediately. So it's not like one of those ones you just kind of got your traction control and the car bogs down for a second. You're like, okay, like give me it back. Like the moment it feels like you're okay, it gives it back to you right away. So it's only minorly intrusive, but definitely way more steering input is required as you work your way up, even into Sport 2. You can get the car a lot more sideways, and you find yourself in a little bit more of a precarious scenario than if you were in Sport 1.
Now I'm looking at your rear brake ducts. So Chevy recommends that you take the lower part of the brake duct off for street driving?
Yeah, there was a guy on YouTube that sucked a bag up into his brake duct and set his rear brake on fire. So I usually just take the 5 bolts off when I'm swapping my rear tires. It's just these 5 7mm bolts. Take the lower shell off and then just throw it in the corner over here. You can see it here. Pretty small.
Oh, okay.
And they kind of drag on the ground a little bit too. I mean, you can see that's it's definitely gotten some damage from just dragging the back of the car around corners.
I guess some of the other things I've noticed is that this car has like a complete flat bottom, just about. And it even has shrouds on the lower control arms to help the front aero. I noticed it has like some small diffusers in the front. What's interesting is it doesn't really have much of a rear diffuser.
No.
I guess with the exhaust and everything, maybe it's hard to package that.
Yeah, I think so. I think you'll see some people make some more aggressive diffusers here, and obviously how the air comes off the back here through the muffler. That's why they put these grates in here, so it's not trying to lift the car up. So I think it's trying to pass as much of the air through here as possible. But I think that you'll probably find some people that are going to do more aggressive diffusers. Some people have some bolt-on ones. I know that like I think that they bolt on between the lower splash shield and the bumper to try to help channel some air, but I don't think it's going to be as effective as going to a full diffuser. I mean, we've seen the C8Rs, obviously those things have a crazy, full diffuser comes off the back of them.
Yeah, or it might be like some of the Super Trofeo Lamborghinis where the diffuser actually hangs out in back of the car,
Exactly.
like by a couple of feet.
Yep.
And maybe what all this means is that if this car gets developed as a serious track car, it might be more dependent on the rear wing option.
Yeah, what's interesting on this is, the people see the high wing on these cars as a factory option versus the standard Z51 wing, and they actually have the same amount of downforce. Like it's only 200 or 250 pounds of downforce between the high wing and the standard Z51 wing. It's just you get more. But you got a little bit more of aggressive angle in the center of the Z51 wing, which I think adds the more downforce concentrated through the middle of it, where this one's got less of an angle on it, where it's not pushing as much downforce. So I was thinking that maybe even a wicker bill, around the back side with some nutserts might help on the rear downforce of even the factory high wing.
That's a pretty interesting point. I guess another thing that happens with a lot of these late model cars is when they get driven on the track, they're really undercooled and they go into limp mode. Now, you haven't experienced that in this car, have you?
No, I mean, I've been lucky enough to drive this thing during the winter months now, and been January and February, but it runs in the low 200s, the trans and diff and engine temperatures. Obviously that kind of all pops up in the track mode, but definitely has never gotten into a lit mode scenario at all. I mean, if anything, that's one thing that's great about this car. It's very linear. Other than the brake fade, the power delivery is still very linear. Like the car's always making the same amount of power, regardless if it's fresh on track or the last 5 minutes of your 25-minute session.
So stock, this car has really generous heat exchangers for the coolant, the engine oil, and the transaxle, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly how many are in here, but I think there's two or three more coolers when you get, again, part of the Z51 package is you're getting more coolers. I don't remember exactly how many and what all they're adding to, but it's definitely, one of the benefits of, the $5,000 package is getting all the additional cooling.
Yeah, looking through some of the holes here, I see like the transaxle has a big water-to-oil cooler about the same size as the GT3 RS, so that's a pretty serious cooler.
Yeah, you can see all the water lines that run up, especially when you have the rear hatch open. You can kind of come in and see all the water lines coming in from the back of the radiators. But definitely does a great job cooling. I mean, it's got the radiators in the rear ducts. It's got them up in the front there. There's at least 4, and there might even be more in here as far as actual radiators.
I think the technology behind this car and the level of trickness is right up there with any of the current supercars, don't you think?
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, for a car that's sub $100,000 and for this car being sub $80,000, I mean, it's pretty hard to beat. I mean, that's always been kind of the claim to fame on the Corvette, is just getting a race car inspired vehicle for less than $100,000, and now going to the mid-engine. And I know the purists will be like, Corvette's not a real Corvette if it's mid-engine, but I don't really care. I think that was having this car as whatever you want to call it for less than $80,000, it be as good as it is. I got no complaints.
And I know a lot of the supercar guys are all butthurt and talk all kinds of crap about this car, and I'm looking forward to actually putting the hurt in some of those guys. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, this last weekend I was chasing down an Aerial Atom, supercharged Aerial Atom, and I've already got some GT3 RS guys that I've got to beat, and GT350 guys, and obviously road racing comes down to a lot of more driver skill than the car a lot of times, but obviously it doesn't hurt if you are decent behind the wheel to have a car that's capable enough to get you around a GT3 RS or something like that.
Now the engine on this is pretty straightforward, right? It's kind of like a carryover of the old engine, direct injected, sort of LS-based architecture. It's dry sump too, right?
Yeah, so this is an LT2. It's very similar in a lot of regards to the LT1 that you would find in the C7s or in the 6th gen Camaros. The other interesting thing is like people actually take the LT2 intake manifold off these and put them on a 6th gen Camaro because they've got a bigger plenum, so they'll make like 10 more horsepower at the crank more than the factory LT2 or LT1 manifolds. So it's definitely interesting in the fact that it's still very much a standard pushrod architecture. Everything's obviously backwards on this thing, so the intake manifold pulls from the air intake back here. It's got a giant air box on it. It pulls fresh air ducts from each corner, and then the front drive's on the front side of the motor. But the motor's great. It gets 25 miles per gallon, on the freeway with the cylinder on demand deactivation. It's nice, and then you can obviously it's got pretty good power. I do wish it would rev a little more. I do think this car would really benefit from another 50 horsepower, but 495 stock, and we're probably maybe 520 now with the exhaust on it. If we're talking about crank horsepower. It still does pretty well, but I would still want it to have 30 or 40 more horsepower.
And it makes quite a bit more horsepower than the C7, right?
I don't remember what the stock C7 numbers are, but I mean, this one's 495 stock, so I think, what was it, mid 400s?
Yeah, something like that.
450, 460. But yeah, I mean, it's direct injected motor, still, no overhead cam yet. So we're obviously with the Z06, we're talking about a 5.5 liter dual overhead cam, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of that.
So this might be a spoiler alert. I don't know if you can talk about it, but what does the Holley Group have down in the pipeline for this motor?
More power parts.
More power parts. That's all you could say?
Yes.
So when you get them, we're going to get them to put on this thing, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I was obviously working at Holley. I was gracious enough to be able to have essentially a final prototype version of this exhaust to drive around and test it and make sure it's good. We work closely with like the NCM, like National Corvette Museum, and they have a full road course there. We ran this exhaust on their school cars to make sure that everything was good with heat and stuff like that, and had them back and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, we're working on other stuff for this motor and chassis.
All right, so there you have it. So I can't wait. We're going to whoop up on some of these douchey, expensive car guys, right?
I'll try my best. You just get the suspension set up, and we'll get the tires on it, and I'll at least go as balls out as I can before crashing into a wall.
All right, it'll be fun. If you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us. And if you want to see more about this project car in detail, go to MotoIQ.com. Keep your eye out. We're going to be rolling out with articles about the stuff we do, videos too. Thank you, Mark, and I'm stoked to work on this.
Same. Thanks.